This is chapter 9, micro lecture number 2. And on this lecture on joints, we're just going to look at what are levers, and then what are the different types of synovial joints. I kind of mentioned synovial joints are the most freely movable joints in the body, but because the synovial joints can then be broken down into individual types of joints, I want to spend some time and go over those particular types of joints. So first, let's define what is a lever. So if you remember in high school or college physics, you can remember that a lever has a resistance, an effort, and a fulcrum. So long bones act as levers to enhance the speed or power of a limb movement. The lever is any elongated, rigid object that rotates around a fixed point called the fulcrum. Rotation occurs when an effort is applied overcomes the resistance at some other point. The resistance arm and effort arm are described relative to the fulcrum. You might not understand what that means, but let's go into a little more detail. So, why do we have levers? It's because you can have a mechanical advantage by a lever. You can exert more force against a resisting object than the force applied to the lever. An example of this is a human moving a heavy object with the help of a crowbar. If you're like, okay, I need to get underneath something, you put a crowbar, you're increasing the distance away, you're pulling down, you get to use less energy and less force to move an object. Another, to move the resisting object further or faster than the effort arm is moved. Movement of a rowboat, where a single lever cannot confer both advantages as one increases and the other decreases. So let's look at the different types of levers and see if I can help you understand why our body has different types of levers. The first one, luckily, is just called first class. So first class lever is just a seesaw, where the fulcrum is in the middle. So the fulcrum remains in the middle, and what happens is you have the effort, fulcrum, and resistance on each side. So resistance, effort. Now if you're looking at the body, chewing and moving down, the fulcrum would be in the middle, and if the fulcrum's in between the effort and the resistance, it has to be a first class lever. And the atlanto-occipital joint lies between the muscles on the back of the neck and the weight of the face. So loss of muscle tone occurs when you nod off in class. So if you lose the effort here, your head drops down. That would be an example of a first class lever. Second class, a little confusing, but this is when the effort and resistance are on the same side of the fulcrum. And this would be a wheelbarrow, where the resistance is in the barrel. You have the wheel, which is going to be the fulcrum, and you would lift it with the arms, and that would be the effort. So this example, muscle tone of the temporalis muscle lies between the jaw joint and pull of the digastric muscles on the chin as it opens the mouth quickly. So effort, resistance are both on the same side of the fulcrum. Finally, third class. This is when you switch the resistance and the effort up. The resistance now is the furthest away from the fulcrum, and the effort is in the middle. And this is the example of you rowing a boat, where you have the fulcrum where your hand is, the effort is where you're actually moving the row, and then the resistance is going to be the water. And if you look at this one, you have your biceps brachii, and the biceps brachii is going to insert onto, should be the radius right here. The resistance is going to be the wrist, and the fulcrum is going to be the elbow. And even though the effort's over here, it's kind of confusing, but where it actually connects is going to be right here. So the effort's coming right here, and the effort's going to be between the resistance and the fulcrum. Now, let's take a look at the classes of synovial joints. And this is what you really need to focus on and memorize in this lecture. Ball and socket, pivot, saddle, hinge, plane, and condylar. So ball and socket, come up with an example of this. This is going to be your shoulder. Ball and socket is the largest freely movable joint. You can move it up, you can move it back, you can move it forward, you can move it down. Ball and socket allows you to move it the largest range of motion. This little pivot joint, pivot just allows rotation, and that's going to be your radius rotating back and forth. The saddle joint is kind of like you sitting on a saddle. Those are going to be those little saddles between the carpal bones and your thumb. It allows some movement, but not a lot. Hinge, on the other hand, is just going to be back and forth, because just like a hinge on a cabinet, it's going to be your humerus to your ulna. And then these plane joints is where they just butt up together, where they can kind of slide past each other. They provide a little bit more movement than a hinge joint, but they all depend on how much they can move forward and move back. And condylar are going to be your fingers. Because they have that ellipse right there, they provide a little bit more movement than a normal hinge joint. They allow some extra movements, but for the most part, condylar does rock back and forth, unlike a hinge joint, but still does that forward and back. Now let's look at each. So ball and socket. Smooth, the hemispherical head fits within a cup-like socket. Shoulder joint, hip joint. Only multi-axial joints in the body are ball and socket. Multi-axial means multiple axes. They can move in multiple directions and freely move in multiple directions without them popping out. Next, condylar. That oval or that spherical convex surface of one bone fits into a complementary shaped depression on the other. The radius and the carpal joint of the wrist, the metacarpal phalangeal joints of the base of the fingers. So pretty much you think of the radius and the carpal bones, you think of the metacarpals to the phalanges. That's going to be biaxial. It moves in two different planes. It can rotate back and forth and front and back. So if you think, move your fingers around. They kind of move from side to side. They do. You can move your fingers, and they also move forward and back. So you can close your hand and open them. And then you can spread your fingers apart and put them back together. Saddle joints. Both joints have the articular surface that is shaped like a saddle. One's concaved in one direction, one's convexed in another. You would be able to sit on a saddle. This is going to be the trapezial metacarpal joint of the base of the thumb. And when you think about the thumb movement, saddle joints allow you to do a couple of different movements that other ones can't. Sternoclavicular joint between the sternum and the clavicle. This is where they join. And then these are also biaxial, so different movements, but they're more movable than the condylar or hinge joint, because if you think about it, if you look at your thumb moving around, it moves a little bit more than the other types. Plane or gliding, they glide past each other. So it's a flat surface on one to a flat surface on another. They don't have a lot of movement because they can only move up or down. They can't slide past each other. Usually biaxial, so your wrist, you can kind of, move your wrist on your own. You can also feel your tarsal bones of the ankle. They move a little bit. They're just sliding above and across. Only move in very small directions. You also have the processes of the vertebrae where the ribs kind of go in there, and they just kind of slide past them. Although any one joint moves only slightly, the combined action of the many joints of the wrist, ankle, and vertebral column will eventually allow for considerable movement. And if you're like, I don't understand that, try to move your wrist bones on your own. Try to move your ankle bones. You can only move them a little bit because there's only a couple bones in your ankle and your wrist. Now try to see how much you can move from side to side in your chair or wherever you're sitting right now. Because there's a lot more vertebrae, there's a lot more movement from side to side because there's a lot more plane or gliding joints in your vertebrae. Hinge. One bone with a convex surface that fits into a concave depression on another. Proximal and middle phalanges, so these are going to be the end of your fingertips. Elbow joint, knee joint, finger and toe joints. Monoaxial. They move freely in one plane, either forward or back. And that's just going to be one individual plane. They can go, you can bend your fingers forward, or you can bend your fingers back up like that. And because it's one plane, you see that I'm drawing it with the laser pointer. That's one. Then I can curve it. But now I can't make that come out of the page or turn from side to side. That's why it's only in one individual plane. Our last joint and last class of synovial joint is a pivot. One bone has a projection that's held into place like a ring-like ligament. So the atlantoaxial joint of the atlas, of the dens of the axis and the atlas. This allows you to turn your head from side to side. That transverse ligament goes around the atlas and the dens. And what happens? It allows your head to turn from side to side. Or if somebody says, do you want to go hang out later? And you're saying no, you're using the atlantoaxial joint of your axis and atlas. You also have the proximal radial ulnar joint, and this allows the radius to rotate during pronation and supination, but because it's only turning your hand or your palm down or turning your palm up, it's also moving in one plane, so a pivot joint is also a monoaxial joint. On your exam, you'll pretty much have all of those classes of, well, you'll probably have a couple of the classes of synovial joints. And what I'll do is the joint between the axis and the atlas is what type of joint. Or I can say the atlas and the axis is what is considered what type of joint. You can say pivot. It might be monoaxial. How many rotations can the pivot joint do? And you would say it moves in one plane. So going through these, making a quick idea of an example of one and what it does would be enough for you to study for the exam. So good luck.